Hey yo, it's Gluck. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about arrangement. Let's go. Okay, so here we are back in Ableton. And I feel like I get asked frequently about how to arrange or what arranging is. When it comes to music, arrangement means that you are arranging the music, but we can get deeper than that. What it really means is how we are presenting the music, both in terms of the time, so like if there's a verse and then a drop and then a build, but also too, it has to do with the arrangement that we've selected for which instruments are playing in which sections, generally just the overall vibe of the track at each specific point, and how that all adds up to one full song. So from my experience, when it comes to arrangement, there's not a lot of concrete things that I can say, do this and this will happen. This is the step in the production process where you really need to listen to the song and decide as a listener if what you're listening to makes sense, because then you can go back as a producer and fix that later. But the listening is the most important part because the song will tell you what's missing. The easiest way for me to demonstrate this idea is by turning this loop into a full song. So this is the loop that we have so far. As you can hear, it's just a real simple loop, but we already have all of the ideas that we would need for the rest of the song here. Now it's just a matter of figuring out which pieces go where. So here is the arrangement that I put together. What I will usually do when I'm arranging a song is once I have the loop here, I'll take this and I'll paste it at the beginning, and then I'll duplicate that. So that way we have two sections of this, and that gives us about 30 seconds, which would be like a mix-in. And then we have our verse, and then we have our build, and then we have a drop, and then we have more of the drop. Usually there'll be some added things here. Then we have a break, a verse, a build, and then into the drop again. And so one of the pieces of advice that I can give is that when it comes to arrangement, figure out a framework that works for you that you can stick to every single time, so that way you at least have a starting point. Every song's going to be different, but by having a starting point, you've already taken a lot of the thought out of it because you can just throw it into that template that you have and then start to decide what needs to happen. Before I get into more of the specifics, the main hotkeys that you're going to want to use, and these are really, really good for arrangement, is Command-Shift-D and Command-Shift-Delete. And the reason why is because Command-Shift-D duplicates the time and everything inside of it. So if I had this mix in here and say I wanted another section of this 8 bars, I don't even have to highlight the entire thing. I just need to highlight the time I want, and then Command-Shift-D, everything gets duplicated. Now let's say I wanted to do the reverse of that, where my drop is too long and I want to go straight from the drop into the bridge. If I do Command-Shift-D, all of that gets pushed back and all of the track gets moved with it. So those two are really, really helpful with regards to arrangement. The other piece of advice with regards to using Ableton in particular is to make sure that you are aware of the state of this lock button, because when it's locked, all of our automations don't move. If I take this part and I say maybe I want these chords in this drop, the automation is not going to stay with it. But if we have the lock off, the automations are going to move with the copies and the pastes. It's just very important to be aware of that because this will save you a lot of headaches as long as you use it right. So now we can focus on the actual arrangement and just a quick way to do it. What I'll do is I'll leave the drums and then I'll copy and paste the bass and the chord over here. And then I'll copy and paste this over again, and I'll bring back in the bass line with all the drums, and then we'll pretty much just go back and forth between having the drums on and off. So if I were to do that again over here super quick, this is what it would look like. So here's our mix-in. Here's our verse. Here's our drop. I'll add one more for a bridge. And now there's our mix out. So that's essentially what it will look like. And now we've made a coloring book for this song where we don't have to decide on how long each section is. We just need to add what needs to go in where. My main piece of advice for when you're doing arrangement is that if you understand the dynamics of each section or how energetic each section should be, that gives you a clue as to either what's missing or what needs to be changed when it comes to finishing the song. So when I first copy and pasted it over here, I added this little vocal just so that we have a bit more stuff to listen to. But coming out of this mix-in, it just went to the chord dry. and obviously that's pretty boring. So in this case, the arrangement that I chose told me, okay, I need to add more musical context here, or some kind of soundscape, because if we just land on this without anything else going on, it's going to get pretty boring to listen to this for another 30 seconds before like the song starts again. I looked at the chord and it's F minor on this stab here. So all I did was write an F minor chord on a really simple supersaw. Because we've arranged it, adding this part became really obvious to me. And so now when we go from the mix into the verse, this is what it sounds like. And obviously we can begin to massage the effects a bit more so that everything really starts to fit. But during the arrangement process, I try to get that done first, so that way I can just go back in and focus on each section without having to worry about if a section's too long or short. Another thing that I do in my arrangement process is I will add effects, and it doesn't have to be like the final. I'll just search riser, and this is the one I landed on. So I just slap that there, and then we have a little impact. And what you want to do is put those at every single important transition. Obviously, from the mix into the verse, we would want an effect there. Then for the build, we're obviously going to want an effect. I probably wouldn't put one in the drop right after the build, just because we want to shift our focus to the drop. And then I'll put another one here where we go from the drop to the bridge, and then a shorter one from the bridge to the verse, and then we pretty much just rinse and repeat. These don't even have to be the final effects. Just having that extra noise allows your brain to help contextualize what the song is going to sound like when it's finished. So without the effects, this is what it sounds like going from our mix in to our verse. And with the effects, this is what it sounds like. So just adding that little sweep and that impact helped me get into a better mindset about what this song would actually sound like. In addition to effects, I also do a lot of my broader automations here. So in the build on the drums, I've put these two echoes into a group and then macroed the dry wet on them. As this section plays, the drums become more and more echoey. And you can start to think about transitions sort of like you're DJing between two songs. When you're DJing, what you're doing is you're picking songs that all add together into one full set. If you take that mentality and apply it to your production here, let's say if I was mixing in from this song, and we'll call it verse for simplicity's sake, and we'll call this song drop. If I was mixing from verse to drop, what I'd probably do is I would start to cut out the lows here to build some anticipation for the bass coming back in. And I would also start to add a bunch of effects here, so that way it sounds like we're going to something new. So this is what the build sounds like all together. Once you have this set up, you can really start to imagine what this song would sound like later on. Because when we go into this drop here, now that this part has more embellishments, I'm more engaged with the musical picture rather than just the production elements of are these hats clean? Is the bass sounding good? So for example, one of them that stood out to me was that at this halfway point here, I knew that I was going to need some kind of fill to ramp us into the next section of the drop, which is essentially the same, and that's because I haven't added anything in. But all I did was I took from the chord progression that I wrote two chords. Here's our F minor, and then this is our tension chord that kind of helps it loop back into itself. And it just goes between those two. And so all I did was I took this chord and I put it here, and I changed the bass sound so that we kind of get that pull out and then push back in kind of feeling. When I was arranging this, I did the copy and paste from here to make the second build and the second drop. Something you'll want to be aware of is after the first drop, you'll want things to be slightly different on the second time around. So that way there's actually a reason to listen to the full song. So when it comes out of the bridge here back into what we could call the verse of the build, I left the drums in so that the rhythm and the energy is still there, and we're not going quite as slow as the beginning of the song now, but it still focuses on the main idea of having that stab with the chords beneath it, because you don't want your song to come to a stop, then start going again, then come to a stop again, then start going again. You want your song to have a bit more of a flow to it, and that doesn't mean that you have to write new music. That just means you have to rearrange the pieces that you already have. And so this is what it sounds like coming out of the drop through the bridge into the verse here. So the way that I was able to keep the energy while also showing that we were going to a more chill section was by removing all of the drums here, but I left the kick in so we still have that pulsing rhythm. And then when we go to the more chill part, it's just the stab and the chords with some filtered drums so that we don't lose that rhythm. But now we're focusing primarily on the chord. The biggest takeaways I hope to show in this video is that when it comes to arrangement, just start doing it. It's just better to illustrate it than it is to try to explain it, because the concrete steps that you would take to arrange a song are going to be different depending on the song from a creative standpoint. What I would recommend is that if you have loops, you just put it here and then duplicate twice, mix in, verse, drop, bridge, verse, build, drop, and pretty much just follow that formula. And then once you've listened to the song a couple times, both in and outside of the studio, you'll start to get a better idea of what each section needs and what it's missing. If you're able to develop a speedy workflow for arrangement, it's going to help you finish a lot more songs, which is the goal, right? Anyways, I hope that this video has helped sort of demystify arrangement and at least given you the motivation to try some of these tricks. But with that, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell so you know when I post new videos, and we'll see you in the next one.